just a quick overview of the schedule, and we can be a little bit loose on this, but I'll just give a quick overview of the next hour and a half or so. Richard and Cynthia are going to give us a brief biography, a condensed biography of Don Stephens, and then we'll just open it up to share our memories of Baba, or of Don, or Baba through Don. And we were thinking it would be nice if one person speaks at a time rather than back and forth, and we'll give each person around 5 minutes to share a memory, something that was important to Don. And we can do it in a couple different ways, but in Zoom, at the bottom, there's a little reactions button. And if you click on the reactions button, you can then click raise hand. And then if we see people's hands raised, we can call on them to share something. And you can also lower your hand the same way. And just as put together a few topics that were dear to Don, that he used to always talk about how Baba would repeat things in threes. And here's a few topics that Don would repeat over and over, just as we can share on anything, but I did want to bring these up because I know these were things that he would often speak about and share with us in relation with his life with Baba. And I encourage everybody to share things along, of his close connection to Baba, and whatever your own personal experiences are. But in particular, Don would often speak about Baba's humanity and how his humanity would inspire him in his daily life. It would change the very way he slept, the way he ate, the way he did everything. Don used to often speak about Meher Baba's words, and he was the custodian of Meher Baba's words. Baba had him translate his words into all the European languages and edit some of his most important books. And, we heard a lot of repeat mention of the atom bombs of energy and the glory of companionship with the avatar, amongst other things. Don also spoke a lot about the resources, the paradigms that Baba set up for the new humanity, whether it was intuition, inner links, companionship. These were things that were a constant thread his entire life. We would often touch on major investments that Baba made. What did he spend his time doing? What were his focuses? Like the must, he spends so much time with the must. Beads on one string, time understanding and working with different spiritual traditions. His new life was a huge one, and of course, seclusions. And those investments sort of lead to what are the resources for the new humanity? What do we have now? Where's the living? How is his presence living through us, being manifested? So those are just kind of a few things to inspire and remind you of a few of the things that we heard Don share with us so many times. And so I think now, if Richard and Cynthia are ready, I'm not sure if you have a slide, but I put together just a little montage of a few photo album books from Don. And so I'll hand it over to you to give just a quick biography of his life before we open it up for sharing.
Could we just test? Are we heard by everybody?
All right.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Thank you. And Jai Baba, everybody. It's such a treat to be gathering to talk about Don. Brief overview or a brief biography. Don Eugene Stephens, born on January 14th, 1919 in Imlay, Nevada. He was our dear friend and companion. He shared his time with us very generously and his profound love for Meher Baba, and he encouraged us in deepening our own understanding of and relationship to Baba, the avatar of the age. He also shared with us qualities of being a true friend, and he emphasized the importance of inner links because Baba had stressed that on his last message on the alphabet board. And Don had many, many, many years of lived experience under the guidance of Baba. And he continued to explore these qualities that were both embodied by Meher Baba and were seen as instrumental in bringing about the dawn of the new humanity. Don was the youngest of three brothers. Earl was the oldest, then Wilfred, and then Don. And Don shared many, many stories of his early childhood, and he had a remarkable ability to recall things in great detail. And sitting on our couch here in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1990s and 2000s, he would tell stories to our children, and I'm sure many of you have heard many of them as well, such as remembering the last time the US cavalry was called out for a scalping of local ranch herders, one of whom he knew. And he enchanted all of us with the story of befriending and riding a wild Mustang that his brothers brought home one day. He snuck out of the house at night, climbed the fence, mounted the horse bareback, and let himself out of the paddock to ride under the stars at night. Returned to the paddock, climbed back in bed. He was only 3 years old at the time. He, through his stories, we could see that he was had a striking personality as a child. There are those early pictures that Sevn has put up that are so wonderful, including that family photo with Don there being the youngest one. He just had a remarkable look about him. He was observant, creative, and practical, and he had a profound interest in animals and creation, and the relationship that underlay all of that, starting from when he was very young. He would recall stories of his little dog, Denny, who was this wonderful ball of fur that his father brought home and gave him on his first birthday. And this dog had a profound effect on his understanding of relating to others and to the world around him. He credits Denny with teaching him fundamentals such as trust, caring, and the basics of companionship. And as Don would share these stories about Denny, as well as many, many other stories, our own dogs, Spike, a little corgi, and Guinness, a great big Rottweiler, would often sit right at Don's feet, just gazing up at him. At around age 5, his family moved to California, and at age 7, his life took a dramatic turn when his father passed away due to illness. His mother remarried, and Don had shared many fond memories of his stepfather. And it was during these years that Don started studying music and came in contact with adults who shared with him overarching concepts of mysticism and reincarnation. In later reflection, Don felt that he was also very receptive to what they were saying, and so they shared more with him. In a conversation with Laurent Weisberger, Don said, and I quote, "I would say that by late teens, I realized that not just physical longing, but an inner need for wholeness was fundamental and could only be met finally by a long process of understanding why oneness was blocked within us. This is why I became a Sufi and why I understood at once when I first stood before Baba that he had completely answered this need for wholeness, but not to be yet in a permanent and total manner. I was quite content to go through the process of removing the huge internal block that was necessary. I did not resent this nor wish to hurry it in any manner, just to know that there was a solution and that I had already had a taste of it was enough to be happy and willing to go the course." After high school, Don attended Black Mountain College in North Carolina, and he found that he couldn't really connect with the school's particular vision. And he left after only a year, and he transferred to Johns Hopkins University, where he majored in organic chemistry. During summers, Don worked up at the Coles farm up in New Hampshire, and the Coles were friends of his, and the family had personally known Ralph Waldo Emerson. And during the summers, Don would visit with the Coles and go down to visit Mrs. Emerson down in Concord, Mass. And during his later years after his heart attack, we took him on a tour and went to Concord to view the old manse and then up to New Hampshire to see the sights that he had seen as a child or as a youth. And through his connections, he was introduced to Murshida Rabia Martin. Shortly thereafter, he was initiated by Murshida Martin as a murid of the Hazrat Inayat Khan Sufi order in America. Hazrat Inayat Khan called Murshida Rabia Martin the mother of the Sufi movement in the United States. She was the first Murshida initiated by Hazrat Inayat Khan. In 1945, Murshida Martin placed her Sufi order directly under Avatar Meher Baba's guidance. Don and his fellow murids were given 1 week to decide if they would continue as Sufis under Meher Baba's guidance. Don agreed. In 1947, Murshida Martin became ill and died, with Ivy Deuce becoming the new Murshida, and it would not be until 1952 that Don would meet Meher Baba in person.
While the Sufis were preparing for Meher Baba's visit to California, Baba was in a car accident in Prague, Oklahoma. In order to meet Meher Baba, Don traveled to Ivy Deuce's Manhattan apartment in New York City, where Baba was recuperating from the injuries from the accident. Don would recount that while waiting for his turn to meet the master, he was surprised to find unexpected tears streaming down his eyes, out of his eyes. Ivy brought Don in to meet Meher Baba, who stood up even with his leg in a cast. Ivy stated, "Baba, this is my boy, Don." Baba waved his fingers and gestured, "No, he is my boy, and he has been with me since the dawn of time." In the follow-up to Don's meeting Baba, he was shortly put to work with coordinating the dissemination of Baba's new Sufism reoriented charter and starting what would become a lifelong job of editing and publishing Baba's principal works. Don was invited to what became known as the 3 Incredible Weeks, but due to illness, he was unable to attend. The following year, there was another gathering, the 4 language group Sahavas in India. Don and Francis Brabazon were the only 2 from the West who were invited to attend. It was there that Baba asked Don if he would take some of the messages he had given out over the years and publish them in a book, along with his experience of the Sahavas. Baba also said, "I will help you." This is the book that became Listen Humanity. The messages from Baba had been gone over in detail by Baba himself and the mandali in a similar manner to the words in God Speaks and the discourses. Baba later indicated to Don that there were atom bombs of spiritual energy attached by Baba to his own special words, and that, quote, "It is your responsibility to explain to Baba's lovers what I have explained to you today." Meher Baba referred to Don as one of his close mandali. He gave Don the responsibility for translation of his major works of God Speaks and the discourses into Spanish, French, and German. Don took this responsibility to heart and followed through. In the 1960s, Don turned out to realize himself as Meher Baba's boy rather than as Murshida Deuce's boy in consequence of his initial meeting with his master. At a point of personal crisis on the issue, Don was coincidentally reassigned from California to London to work for Chevron in Europe. This would become his permanent base of operations and endless travel for the remainder of his life. Don continued to work with seekers in the small group format that began in San Francisco with a number of hippie seekers who started to show up at his doorstep. This approach now continued with both its English location and later a European incarnation. Because he found himself keeping offices in France as well as in England, it was only natural for him to work with Baba lovers in both countries as well. Over the years, Don introduced a small group approach around the world, and a number of these groups continue on today. He saw the small committed group as a more intimate platform for the exploration of both inner potentials and challenges, with the use of intuition as the primary guide in relationship with the avatar. Intuition, Meher Baba told Don, was his avataric gift to humanity in this Advent. Don never ceased his exploration of ways to grow closer to Baba, God, the drop soul, recognizing what may stand in the way and developing strategies to work with this. Don Stevens encouraged the seeker to engage in the opportunities that daily life bestowed, with Baba's help and guidance at hand. Even the event of a severe heart attack in 2006, Don treated as an opportunity to strengthen his connection with his beloved. The nursing staff was amazed that an 86-year-old would walk further and climb more stair steps than anyone had previously on the day following an open heart surgery. In the late 1950s, Baba had sent Don to photograph and film a number of specific places in India. It was not until the late 1990s that Erich had the chance to see the composite film, whereupon he immediately contacted Don to tell him that all of these sites are places that he and Baba would visit, with Baba traveling incognito and where he would spend time alone, often with the other mandali not even knowing where they went. In 2004, Don took a group of pilgrims to revisit these places that included the Ellora Caves, Shivaji's fort in the Mahabaleshwar area, the tomb shrine of Mohinuddin Chisti in Ajmer, and the Dilwara temple at Mount Abu. In the course of this return trip, Don had the distinct experience that all of these sites were directly tied to Baba's specific work to bring the religions of the world together, like beads on one string. After a short period of convalescence following his heart attack, Don enthusiastically resumed what became Beads on One String annual group pilgrimages in the consecutive years of 2007 through 2010. In conjunction with those pilgrimages, the organization of Beads on One String was developed and incorporated during the year leading to Don's death in April of 2011. Don's legacy lives on both through Beads on One String and through the deep impact he has had on many of us in the Baba world, and on many of you who are here today. Jai Baba.
Yeah, Baba.
Thanks, Richard and Cynthia. All right. So if anybody would like to share, please put your hand up, either using the reactions in Zoom, or if you can't find that, just unmute and say, I want to go next. Renata, you want to start us off?
Okay, I'll go next.
Okay, go ahead, Neil.
But before I do, just hello everyone. Wonderful to see Cynthia and Richard. And I don't have a gallery situation, but I think I came in a little later, but that doesn't matter. Don, I'm going to speak to you in the second person because I know how much you loved conversation. Our relationship was defined by what you like to call politely truing, but impolitely trading punches. All of this had to do with your passion for purposeful and meaningful conversation that would stretch the mind as well as the heart. I remember one night when we were on the way to the meeting place by car at the Baba Center at Myrtle Beach, and in the middle of one of our trading punches on a variety of your favorite topics at the time, Don, you turned to me and said, you know, Neil, Baba said that I was an almost perfect balance of the mind and the heart. And with a smile, I responded, yes, this is true, but don't forget the word almost. Your eyes looked at me with such fire they could burn a hole in stone. And then you smiled that smile of yours that says, thank you. Don, in those last years of yours, you didn't reduce, but stepped up the pace of tireless travel. You epitomized that courageous willingness of Baba's close mandali to allow Baba to work on dissolving more, perhaps even the remaining of your sanskaras. If you were here in the physical, I'd ask you if you thought that sanskars, whether natural or unnatural, positive or negative, were connected to whatever Baba may have meant by his proclamation that you were an almost perfect balance of the mind and the heart. We had many conversations on what you called Baba's gift of intuition to the world. And during my work with you and others on the Intuition Project that turned into a book, you underscored the need for the truing of intuition, that intuitions about reality were the result of the soul's keen sense of sight that sees beyond the limits of the rational mind, but unclearly. You talked often about intuitions having colorations that filter ultimate truth like clouds that obstruct the sun. You counseled us wisely that intuitions need to be tested through rational means, worked through and allowed to develop and clarify over time, and through conversing about them with trusted others. You noted that our prejudices and beliefs obscure and determine our perception and obscure intuition. But more importantly, that these colorations play a role in the creation of sanskaras, dense impressions that cover, conceal, and distort reality, and consequently our true identity. Yet you made it clear to me that there would be no story of the self, no adventure without our sanskaras. In other words, sanskaras or veils actually define the journey of individual consciousness gradually over many lifetimes, unfolding into infinite consciousness while we are right here in the world. I want to thank you, Don, for gifting me with a copy of your airplane notes, your early reflections circa 1960 on the path of the Salik, meaning wayfarer or traveler. You put these thoughts in a spiral-bound notebook, words apparently written on an old typewriter. It is probably my favorite writing of yours because it's a compilation of your intuitions on Baba's reorientation of Sufism, practical wisdom that could be used and referred to by any sincere person, including those who were not bona fide members of Baba's official Sufi order. And in the airplane notes, you wrote something unforgettable to me that I continue to be inspired by. Quote, "The aspirant must return to the laboratory of practical life to plunge again into the challenging mechanics of the raising of sanskaras to the conscious level and their gradual dissipation. More than a means of earning money to sustain the body, the practical life is the spiritually necessary vehicle for the involution of consciousness." Don, you were the epitome of this process. You embodied for me the Salik, welcoming all truing, welcoming those sanskaras being raised by the crucible of our relationships and then dissolved in that loving but often firm process of truing. Thank you, Don, for being this almost perfect balance of the head and the heart. I miss you, but I feel your presence. And I know that you are so close to Baba. And I am happy to be here and honor you in some small way. Thank you.
Renata, do you want to go next? And then David? Renata, can you unmute yourself first? Let's see. Oh, I got it.
I am.
I can hear you now. Yes.
I am Renata Moritz, and I was part of Don's second study group in London. That was 1982 till the end of his life. Yeah, to say that Don traveled really every week from France to London to attend the study group is amazing. The effort. Later on, it was fortnightly, and years later, it was monthly. He did that. What attracted me to Don Stevens in the very beginning was the clarity of thought and the absence of any guru mannerism. Around 2005, Don's intuition accumulated and were sent to us. The intuition emails became a river of insights, which me personally overwhelmed. They were never discussed. They were put to us. Where and when did these intuitions happen to Don? By cleaning his teeth, by shaving and showering, at 3 o'clock in the morning, when ironing his trousers, and so on. What effect did these intuitions have on Don? One short remark about it. This intuition almost singed my whiskers. I was struck by its mystery. Some intuitions are phrased and told to Don by a voice not specified. Don took these moments very seriously and noted them down diligently, even at night, where he had always a pen ready with a small light attached to it, to see and noting them down. I consider many of Don's intuitions as structures and actual roadmaps related to the spiritual landscape of Meher Baba given to us. These are amazing tools. There are 15 or more intuitions on the roll of the divine whim. Unlike, as often understood, being the single event when drop souls and creation took place. Don's intuition places the whim as a component of each drop soul per se. Man's creativity comes from that phenomenon, the divine whim, which has its being in the beyond state of God. This is what I call a roadmap. Intuitions seem to have two sources. A, the divine of the soul, and B, the accumulated wisdom of the soul. What both sources have in common is the absence of the limitation of sanskaras. However, to reach the surface of man's awareness, the intuitive insights percolate through the sanskaric layers of the person, and then at the end of it waits the personal ego, which is super keen to appropriate the entire happening. So the entire intuition will suffer coloring to some a very considerable degree. What to do? Dawn suggested a form of corrective, as Neil said, truing, which invites another individual, a trusted friend, who does not share the same sanskaras per se, which polluted the original intuition, and so might be in the position to spot the coloring and help cleaning the intuitive message. That is a roadmap, don't you think?
David, did you want to go?
Yes. Okay. Thanks. Yes, I was also had the good fortune to be in Don's study groups. I was in the one that met before the one that Renata was in, and then I joined the one that Renata was in when the first one stopped meeting. And also I was able to kind of participate in the publications of the Neti Neti newsletters over quite a number of years. And I think I was always drawn to Don's graciousness and the personable quality of his presence, but also the balance that he presented in just his manner. It felt safe, it felt collaborative, it felt respectful, and his generosity in how he shared his own kind of curiosity and journey was just so enlivening and inspiring, really. And I always was struck at how he gave a balance of both in a project to kind of work and focus in the project, but also to have fun and to make sure that we spent time together relaxing. And Don was a deeply spiritual person, but he also really appreciated the beauty in creation and the marvelous things that would come out of creation, like cheese and wine. And so he would always bring these wonderful cheeses from this special cheese shop that he had found in Paris for our dinners after we had kind of worked to cut and paste Neti Neti. He brought the idea of computers to us, and I remember it was such a kind of new concept. And Don, of course, was right there at the beginning with the computers, So he was quite innovative, and he had quite a methodical approach to things as well. He could be very, very, specific and really focused. But we had some wonderful meals together, and in those meals, it sort of took companionship to another level, because there was the companionship that I think he helped us create in sustaining these groups that would meet regularly. And I remember Don saying the level of commitment that he had to these groups was a reflection of his level of commitment to the relational quality of life on the journey to the source of truth. And he would say, even if no one comes to these meetings, I will still be there. And he will still be sitting on the sofa waiting for people to arrive. And he had a deep level of commitment. But he also had a deep level of joy and appreciation and fun, and it helped the journey move along and grease the wheels, as it were. And I think it brought a wonderful message to all of us about how we kind of organize our meetings together in the name of Baba, in the name of our kind of search to share and understand the meanings of our inner life, to not forget the fact that we also need to have a warm, companionable inner link with each other. And that will just be something I always remember with Don. It was really, really odd. A couple of days ago, I had a dream about Don, and I had this email from Don Stevens. and I think, Cynthia and Richard, I think as somebody else that received it was Leslie as well, but it was an email from Don Stevens. and I didn't open the link because I think it was a not to be opened, but the subject of the email was something like, take advantage of the opportunities presented to you, don't waste your precious life, and enjoy it and celebrate. And this is something that I always hold very dear in my memories of Don, and thank him for that. So he would also read these airplane notes to us, Neil. He would, in the first group, he was traveling all over the world, and he would write these airplane notes quite often while he was away. And then our meetings would start with Don reading an airplane note. They always started with him reading the airplane note. So anyway, it's lovely to be here with everyone. Jai Baba.
Sevn, could I call attention to Angela has posted in the chat other ways to click raise hand for those of you who don't have a reactions button or are not familiar. So in the chat box, there's our keystrokes that will get you there. It's helpful if you raise your hand digitally so we can see and call in, or so Sevn can call in order. Thanks.
Thanks, Betty. Tony, I see your hand up. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm particular to remember Don, but particularly to see so many people who I've met over the years, in particular at Lake Balaton. He had a gathering there, and at other places and times. And my story with Don is a bit different in that I was not part of one of his study groups for the most part. But he goes right to the beginning of my relationship with Baba. Baba reached out to me at the moment he dropped his body internally. And a year later, I discovered him. It set me on a quest. And I came back home and I recognized him immediately. And I was telling everyone I knew, not whoever I saw, my mother, a friend. And this friend was listening. And we walked to his apartment. I'd never been there. He goes into his bedroom, he comes out and he hands me this lovely photo of Baba from London 32, and God Speaks, a copy of God Speaks. So I went home that night, and my first night with Baba, with this exaltation of knowing that Baba was here all these years, I started reading Don's introduction. So, and really speaking, Don was my first Baba contact. And I so loved what I was reading, and I particularly loved what I would describe now as that balance of mind and heart and that intellectual honesty. So his heart is fully with Baba, and yet mentally he's saying, I can't tell you beyond my own awareness. And but my own experience is this. And I just was so touched by the intelligence and the heart. Years later, a few years later, I was find myself around Dr. Harry Kenmore, and then he passed away. Dramatic story, and a group formed that had its pluses and minuses that had been around him. But one thing that we did was put together programs. First, they were shows, and then multimedia and film. And Don was around quite often providing the narration for the theme of creation and its purpose, or narrating the biography of Baba. And his voice, to me, Don said so much through his voice, even through his silences. There was an understanding. He was a wonderful, and then when things got very bad for me in that group, he happened to show up, and it was such a wonderful, natural, easy, everything is really okay presence. And one time with that group, we were in Paris, at his apartment in Paris, and they made us this, Claude and Don made us this wonderful meal and made us Singapore slings. I don't think any of us had Singapore slings before. And on another day, we went, I'm not sure if it was an apartment or somewhere else, but we were recording him reading Francis's ghazals for a program on the ghazals. And the ghazal was the one that begins, you warned us that on this path there was nothing but pain. And we glibly assented, but now we complain. I could almost do it all from memory. It's such a beautiful ghazal. And Don is reading it, it's being recorded, and he gets to this line, what irks is the very ordinariness of this pain. Not even our names on an honor roll of the slain. And he got so choked up that he could not continue. I don't know if I remember actual tears, but the emotion was so deep. And it was a side of Don I had not seen, and his being able to be so transparent and emotionally open so impressed me. Point came when I left that group. I went to work at the United Nations. That's how I wound up being at Lake Balaton, because the UN was sending me to cover the Human Rights Conference in Geneva. So I was nearby. We'd see him often in New York, sometimes go out afterwards. One time I remember with my wife at a lovely, intimate family Italian restaurant, sitting next to Don, eating my lasagna and having a conversation, just a conversation. And yet it was one of the richest moments of life, having a conversation with Don. I guess the last thing I want to share, because I have always felt that companionship from that first opening of God Speaks. So he was in New York, and for some reason, I think I was in some show, I couldn't get to the meeting in time. And I was so upset at not having a chance to see him. But I knew he was staying at my friend Yolanda's home out on the island. And so I called thinking maybe they were having an event and I could come by and just be part of it. And she said, yes, come at this time tomorrow. What I didn't realize, there was no meeting. They had scheduled a private meeting with Don, which actually I'd never had before. And it was in his room there. And I was going through something pretty intense. I had a family member who was a bit psychopathic, and he was engaged in a course that could have really jeopardized the remainder of my life, materially speaking. And we were in legal stuff, and Don just out of the blue elicited this. And I wouldn't have brought this to him. but he brought it up, he brought it out, he engaged the conversation, ending finally by saying, well, maybe Baba will turn the key. But in the middle of this, there were moments where he was going inside to check before he spoke to me. And indeed, everything in that situation that had been going on for years transformed over the next month, I suppose. And I'm able to be here comfortably in my home, which I would not have been if that had not changed. One other thing to mention, it's just peripheral, but I often think of it. When I was about 55, I started losing memory for names occasionally, and I've always had a wonderful memory. I'm a writer, and that's important. So I'm sitting there with Don, and he's at around 90. He's saying things that just blew me away, recollections. And I said, Don, you're way ahead of me in years, and yet your memory is so sharp. And he said that he would share with me this, that at some point, Baba created a shunt between the higher mind and this brain, to bypass this brain, so that I would still have what my physical brain was no longer able to access. And it was such a natural thing to say. It wasn't woo-woo, or it was just a candid sharing of his inner experience. And I suppose that's my main takeaway from Don, is his wonderful mind, his extraordinary heart, and his candid oh, one other thing. Angela just posted recently some old Baba House meetings, and there was a meeting on homosexuality that Don held at her home, in fact. And I didn't remember that I was there. And he asked me to sing something I had just written as we were coming back to the next session. And it was to the tune of Begin the Begin. And I usually don't set to other people's tunes, but the lyric had come and it meant a lot to me. I never knew until I saw this video how with every single line, visibly it was clear that Don was taking it in, reflecting on it, expressing pleasure with it, occasionally glancing at Laurent to express pleasure with it, but that he totally considered every word in that song. I miss him. I definitely miss him. I feel his presence as I have all the years, but I also miss being able to see him in person, and I am so grateful. I hope it didn't take too much time, but to be with you all here. Thank you. Jai Baba.
Thanks, Tony. AJ, I see your hand up.
It's gone.
Hey, AJ, do you want to share? I see your hand up. Okay, would anybody else like to share?
I'm Annie.
I will.
I will.
Hi, Annie.
Annie, yes. Hi, I'm Annie. The two things I remember most about Don were his gentleness and his voice, that amazing, deep, considered, slow, gentle, warm voice. And I first met him when I was new to Baba, and I went to those meetings in Eccleston Square in London. It must have been at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. And he would have jetted in from somewhere to take the meetings on Monday night in Eccleston Square. And he would read the discourses, and then there'd be the first half, which would be reading the discourses. And and discussing them. And he would take a paragraph, and for somebody who was new to Baba and a complete novice, he made it just so simple. He would take little sentence by sentence, and he would illustrate it with, narrate it with examples, and make it kind of words of 2 syllables that somebody could, like me, could understand, could get, like as simple as sanskaras, you know, for instance, don't go through the same turnstile on the tube every day, you know, for instance, change a habit pattern, as he would like to call them. And he was a wonderful narrator and storyteller, and it was all very illuminating. And he would say about kind of the zigzag course going from one opposite to another. He would compare it to 2 sides of a riverbank or 2 riverbanks, and to try to aim not for the edge of it, but to try and aim for the route down the middle. I remember that about him. And he would always, when he was in London, he would always ring me up and take me out to lunch somewhere smart, somewhere grand, and always say, make sure you put on your best bib and tucker. And he took me to the Berkeley, I think, and he was just so, he was not only mentor and sort of a father figure, but he was just so kind about little things. I had a pussycat who I'd just lost and was terribly upset. And he rang up and he said, you will see him again, but you may not recognize him. And I just remember what he was so, even about the littlest thing, he was so good. And then I lost touch with him because I moved to the country out of London, and I was immersed in my farm and whatnot. And years later, it must have been about 5 years before he died, suddenly out of the blue, there was this call. Annie, it's Don Stevens. And it was a message on the answering. It's Don Stevens. I went, you know, you can ring me back if you want. And if you don't want, that's fine. We'll be eternal friends. And of course, I rang him back immediately and said, how'd you get my number? And he had tried to email me, but it got lost. I said, it must have got lost in the ether. And he said, that darned ether, it's got more tentacles than an octopus. And anyway, we met. I went to London, but there was another pussycat who was on her way out, and I had to ring and cancel the day before for his lunch in Fortnum's, and he must have been 90 something by then. And he totally understood, and he rang the next day to see how she was. That's Don. About the littlest things, so loving and so fatherly and so kind. And I met him, and we went to Fortnum's with a friend was staying, Sue Tucker, she lives in California, and I remember him because he loved his food, and he always said the French had food right there, it was under their thumb, and he wanted his roast beef rare, rare, rare. And he must have been 90 something, and he got very small. He kind of shrunk. He was almost unrecognizable, but his spirit was totally Don. It was increased, not diminished at all. It was totally Don. And he held forth over lunch, like about beads on one string. And then my great sadness is that I had a computer, but I wasn't very techie minded, and I did not get the email telling me that he had died and about his funeral, which really broke my heart. I would have wanted to go very badly. And I remember him saying about that lost in the ether, but I'm so glad. That's why I'm so glad to just say a little something now, to say what I feel about him. And also, somebody just before I said about getting an email, I also got an email. I get them from time to time. They're gobbledygook. It's all rubbish, and I think they go into the junk email, but it's from Don Stevens. And I think, hang on a minute, are you out there in the ether just saying, I'm around, I'm still here? So Don, I love you and thank you. And thank you for being there for me always. And I miss you. And thank you for the opportunity of saying this. Jai Baba.
Yeah. John, you still there?
Yeah. Sevn. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Well, I was not planning to say anything, actually. 1 second. But then I thought, well, you know, I've been playing Begin the Begin for some time, been rehearsing it again. And of course, I owe it all to Don, because when I met him when I was 18, I was in Paris, and I was brand new Baba lover, and we would meet in the 20th arrondissement at Eliane's place. I think Don at that time would come every fortnight to Paris, and we would have these lovely meetings. And after it opened so much about Baba, and after the meeting, there were a few of us, and we were like floating, going back to our homes, and we felt like we were floating in the air. There was so much love. And Don, when he heard that there was I had a piano and I was playing the piano, he was thrilled, and he came to my place, and we played 4 hands. And he gave some notes of Haydn and all, and he gave me the notes of Begin the Begin. But it's quite hard, and I was not really able to practice it, so I never played it for him. And I thought I was playing it this afternoon. I recorded it on the electronic piano in Mehrabad, where I am right now. And I thought, well, would it be a good idea to sing it for you? And then I heard, and I didn't know, and then I heard that Tony was sharing about it, that Don was so happy to hear it, that tune and all. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna sing it right now for you. I hope you don't mind. So the piano is recorded, I'm right at the piano, and I'm gonna just sing. When they begin, it brings back the sound of music so tender. It brings back a night of tropical splendor. It brings back a memory evergreen. I'm with you once more under the stars. And down by the shore, an orchestra's playing. And even the palms seem to be swaying. When they begin to live it again, this hostile endeavor. Except when the tune clutches my heart, and there we are, swearing to love forever, and promising never, never to part. Which moments divine, which rapture serene. Till clouds came along to disperse the joys we had tasted. And now when I hear people curse the chance that was wasted, I know but too well what they mean.
So don't let them begin the begin. Let the love that was once a fire remain an ember. Let it sleep like the dead desire I remember. When they begin, they begin. Oh yes, let them begin, they begin. Make them play. Till the stars that were there before return above you. Till you whisper to me once more, darling, I love you. And we suddenly know what heaven we're in. When they begin, they begin. And when they begin, they begin.
Dear Baba, thank you. Listen to you.
That was lovely.
Thank you, John. That's lovely. Oh, Catherine.
Hi, Sevn.
Hey, I have a picture of the two of you. So if you want to share right now, that'd be perfect.
Okay. I'd love to see the picture. Oh my goodness. But I'm not in that picture. Oh, that's 1978 when I met him in Chicago. And I'm wearing Joseph Harb's necktie that had been Joseph Harb's that had been given to me by Dick Duman to wear for this precise occasion. And Dick Duman also gave me a 8x10 photo of Joseph Harb to present to Don. And
I don't know who Joseph Harb is. He's in the 3 Incredible Weeks.
yeah, Joseph Harb was born 2 weeks before Baba. He was a Druze from Lebanon. And when he met Baba, Baba told him, when I heard you cry, I knew it was time for me to come to Earth. So they were very close. Carrie, Harb, and Joseph were known to Baba as Carrie Joe, and he would make a symbol of a woman's bracelet to indicate Carrie. But anyway, yeah, 1978. And that evening, we went out to dinner with, it was about 20 people at an Asian restaurant, Chinese restaurant. And I very superstitiously regard my fortune cookie messages as emails from God. And that night, the fortune cookie said, you will travel to many places. And that is what Don did for me. That was just one of the things. I mean, I was so fortunate to have a close association with him from that time on. And, you know, he came to Denver many times, either on his way to or from somewhere, or specifically just for a visit. And him having been born in Imlay, Nevada, which is this town that it's a blink and you miss it town on Route 80. I went through there one time and stopped and took a photograph of the sign that said Imlay. It's just this desolate place. There's just almost nothing there. But, and I don't know how many of you know the story. I wanted to tell a couple of stories about when Don's rascal side sort of came out. And one of them was when he was 3 years old and he climbed up on the corral and he got on the horse and he rode it out of the gate. And you know, no bridle, no reins, no nothing. And they just went off, he and the horse, and had a going round and here and there, and he just let the horse go where it wanted. And it began to get twilight, and they sort of were on a hill or someplace where they could see the town, and they could see all the lights were coming on in the houses, and all kinds of people were running all over the place and shouting, and, you know, because they were all shouting for Don. They're all looking for Don. And so he and the horse turned back, and they went back, and, you know, and everybody was like, oh my God, there he is, grab him, you know. So, but that is such an expression of unity, trust, faith, and love, he and the horse together on their ramble. And so I always loved that story, but I wanted to also tell something that happened on the 2010 pilgrimage in India. We were at Hyderabad, and Don wanted to go up to the Mononash cave. Well, on that pilgrimage, he was in a wheelchair most of the time. And it had rained like hell the night before. And so Balaji, who was Don's dear friend, had told him, Don, I don't think it's a good idea for you to go up to the hill, because it's going to be just too muddy and treacherous and slippery. And you know, Don was not pleased. And so Balaji comes to me, because in 2010, I was the pilgrims coordinator person. And he says, you need to go down to the apartment and tell him that, no, he's not going to go up to the hill. And I'm like, oh, great. Thank you so much for making me the person to go and try to, you know, argue with Don, like you think I'm going to win. And so I go downstairs to the apartment. Well, he's gone. The apartment is empty. So what had he done? He had sneaked up the stairs, although, you know, he couldn't even move very fast at that point. So anyway, we learned he'd gotten one of the taxi guys, the guys with the cars, and insisted that he be taken up to the hill, which they didn't want to argue with him either. So they took him. So then all of us are like the Keystone cops jumping into the cars, and, you know, oh my God, we've got to get up there. And we thought we'd find him maybe at the bottom of the hill. No, he was already up there on the top. So we all went up, and Don was simply not taking no for an answer on this, because I think he knew that this was his last time coming to India. And and it was a disaster with the wheelchair. It actually, one of the wheels on the wheelchair broke as we were trying to bring him back over, you know, it's rocky, and it's kind of rough. And so now we had 4 guys who had to pick up the wheelchair and carry him down. And but he was not to be denied on that. And he was right. And you know, I'll tell a quick story too about something else there. Oh, beautiful. Beautiful. In 2010, before we were leaving from Delhi, 2 of the ladies that we were expecting arrived, and one of them, and I won't say who it was, but one of them had her backpack or her purse snatched off of her at the train station, and she had absolutely no money. She had not 1 penny. And so right there, Don just gave her all the money that she was going to need. on the spot. That was his typical. He was so generous to all of us, wasn't he? He totally changed my life. He's huge in my life. And I'm just looking forward to seeing him again. And he's given me all of you wonderful people. I think he would be so happy that Begin the Begin was sung today. Really appreciate that. The other thing about Don that's so profound, I mean, he envisioned that Mediterranean Basin tour as a pilgrimage of forgiveness. And who knows how that, he was prescient. He must have felt it coming, that, you know, these places were perhaps endangered, or, you know, they aren't there now in the way that they were when he suggested that tour. And unfortunately, at that point, his health was very fragile. Plus that tour was extremely expensive. And it just never came to fruition, which is kind of really too bad. But I miss him greatly. He's one in a million, or one in millions of millions. So special and rare. It's just an incredible blessing to have spent time with him. And, never to be forgotten, that's for sure. I love you, Don. Jai Baba.
Thanks, Catherine. Richard, Cynthia?
Just in a follow-up to Jean's wonderful performance of Begin to Begin, and Catherine mentioning how he loved the song, it reminded us right away of when Don had his heart attack in 2006, in the fall of 2006 at our house, and Sevn was there, and Dan Sanders, who's also in the audience, was there. And Don had congestive heart failure, and fortunately 911 was very fast in arriving, and otherwise Don would have passed away. He wasn't able to breathe, and so it was literally 2 minutes that took the fire truck, I think, was the first to arrive, and immediately get some oxygen to Don. And Don actually technically died in the ambulance while it was parked in front of our house on Beckford Street in Salem. And fortunately, Sevn was on hand and knew what medications Don had been on, and they were able to revive Don and take him to the hospital. And not long after that, it was obvious that Don needed open heart surgery and a heart valve replaced and so forth. And he had this incredible open heart surgery where he actually had a bovine valve replacing his aortal valve, and the scar was literally from the top of his chest at his collarbone all the way down to his navel. It was just tremendous, surgery. And this was all done, I think it was about a 7-hour surgery, perhaps 7, something like that. It was a good long surgery. And Don was in the hospital, I think really for just one day after the surgery. And on that first day after his surgery, he was able to climb, as I mentioned in his biography, more steps and walk more paces than anybody in the history of Salem Hospital had ever walked and taken after heart surgery. And then he was allowed to come back to our house, and he got to our house and we had dinner that night. And then he turned around and sat at the piano and played Begin the Beguine. And it was about the most moving rendition of Begin the Beguine I've ever heard, or ever will hear for that matter. So that had a very, Don had studied music as a child and would play Bach and played less in his later years. I never heard him play much, but he played some while he was recuperating from his heart surgery. And but Begin the Beguine was at the top of his list, and it was just great.
See, Marnie, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Oh, these stories of Don are just absolutely fantastic. And I'm a relative latecomer in terms of knowing Don in this life. And like so many of you, he had just a profound effect on my life and the direction that my life has taken since meeting him. I know Don primarily through Beads on One String. And the first way we met initially was he was on this West Coast tour. And like he did so much, you know, like so many of your stories tell us that he would seek out people. And I would say that was one of the salient qualities of Don in my experience and observing what you're all saying, is that he would seek out souls, and then he would do all that he possibly could. I mean, this incredible travel that he did worldwide, all the attention that he gave. Annie, when you talked about the attention to your cats, was so beautiful. And I just think that that was something that was such a deep part of Don. He looked for souls to help in their spiritual journey. And I was certainly the beneficiary of that. And I didn't even know it. I was so lucky. And he came to our home to give a talk to our small Baba group in Portland, Oregon. And then Don and I just clicked. And so he started a small group called the Young People's Group. And since I was almost, I don't know, moving towards 60 at the time, I remember Dan Sanders was in the group and a lot of young people were in the group. Cynthia and Richard were in the group. And people said, Doug and Marnie are in the Young People's Group. So we always felt that it was so sweet of Don to include us. And but anyway, one thing led to another. And he, in the latter years of his life, he put a lot of energy and effort into developing the Beads on One String, what became the Beads on One String Foundation. And Sevn was involved in the very early parts of this, and then it continued into a steering group. And at the beginning, or in the beginning for me, and there was a lot of history that preceded it that I'm not completely familiar with, but for me, he said, well, Marnie, I'd like you to be the chair of the Beads on One String steering committee. And I said, absolutely not. I was totally nonplussed. I felt completely unable to do the work. And so Don's response was, okay. But then over the ensuing months, he just gave me a little bit more responsibility, a job here, a job there, a job there. And pretty soon, all of a sudden, I found myself as chair of the Beads on One String Foundation, which has been absolutely one of the greatest experiences of my entire life. And oh my goodness, it's completely built on the legacy that Don gave us through his absolute devotion and all of his work for Baba. And I believe that, and I would imagine that many of us here have the same experience, that Don found all of us and these souls, and he worked with each of us to give us the opportunity that we could do work for Baba, that we could do work in service of Baba. And he saw it as his way to help us along in our spiritual journeys. And of course, all of the work is actually Baba's, but Don opened the doors to be able to do this work. And that is certainly my experience on the Beads on One String. And Betty, you had mentioned that you wanted to know a little bit more, and we could talk a lot more in the future about this, but just some of the things that we have incorporated into the beads based on Don's legacy include his wonderful concept of companionship. And you've mentioned truing and being together in small, intimate companionship groups where we can really go deep and engage in our spiritual journeys with each other. Don's dedication and responsibility for Baba's words was a huge part of his life, and he's given us the means to continue that through companion books in which we continue to publish translations of Baba's work and also editions of Baba's work, as well as some other spiritually oriented books. And then a third thing that was such a wonderful aspect of Don was his incredible generosity. And Catherine, you mentioned that, and I think we've all experienced how generous he was. And he was generous to the beads. And so it has allowed us to develop grants and scholarships, not really large ones, but we are able to give grants and scholarships to people who are involved in spiritual endeavors. And again, it's a continuation of the legacy of John's generosity, which was so far-reaching that it was so beautiful. And then finally, there's just one other aspect that I'd like to share with you that has profoundly impacted my life, and that is the way Don worked in groups. And I experienced Don as always working towards harmony. Now, the Beads on One String Foundation has a board of really smart, strong-willed, experienced people. So you can imagine that when 10 or 11 of us get together, we have different approaches to problem solving. And sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's very challenging. But through Don and the legacy that he gave us, and through beloved Baba's incredible help, we've learned how to have consensus problem solving and get to an answer that has created harmony and really enriched us in our companionship and the depth of our spiritual journey. And all of that I attribute to Don, his love for Baba, and Baba's incredible presence and support for us. So these are the legacies of Don that we have built into the Beads on One String and our projects, our activities. And this is what I hope that we can give to future generations who will take over, I'm hoping, Beads on One String, and then they will fulfill that in their own way, but always remembering that Don was just a wonderful inspiration for all of us. And it was because of his devotion and his incredible work for beloved Baba. So thank you.
Thank you, Marnie. Jane, are you still there?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Hi. Well, I was going to talk about Beads on One String, but that seems to be really well covered. I was going to talk before Marnie and talk about the history of it. So I just want to say, I'm so moved by everyone's talking about Don, and it's bringing back just such wonderful memories of this marvelous person that we all had the fantastic good fortune to meet. I mean, he was just something else. He was just wonderful. And I was remembering when you were singing, Jean, how at the seminar in Berlin that Don was meant to come to, but he wasn't well enough, and he'd asked you to sing the Song of the New Life. And I remember you singing that for Don without him being there. And there was something just so touching about that. And just another sort of memory of being on a pilgrimage with Don. And it was the European pilgrimage, because as well as the Indian pilgrimage, Don also, in fact, the first pilgrimage I went on with Don in 2006, I think, was the pilgrimage around Europe, which was to all the places Barbara had been to Avila, to Madrid, to Barcelona, Assisi, Portofino. We'd also went to the Alhambra, and we went to Cordoba to see the mosque and the anyway, this was to bring all the beads on one string that were from the Abrahamic religions together. And we were one of the special moments on that pilgrimage was going to Avila, and Don was determined to find the exact spot that Barbara had stood in, overlooking Avila. Barbara had gone to Avila. Barbara had said that he'd been in Avila in a past life before Jesus. And then he went back there with some of the mandali, and he had gone up to the hills above Avila. And he'd stood and looked over Avila, and Don wanted to find this exact spot. And through, I think it was a couple of books, I can't remember whose book it was now, maybe it was Kitty Davey. Anyway, Don had also got Rafael Vilfani from Mexico and a Spanish guide to go up there to find this spot. And then we all piled up in vehicles with Don and helped Don across the fields to these extraordinary stones which are above Avila, which are quite similar actually to the stones around the Mananash cave near Hyderabad. Anyway, Don managed, through the directions from these books, managed to find the exact spot where he felt that Barbara had stood, and Don's just absolute pleasure. And it was just a very marvelous moment actually. And Barbara, if Barbara's spirit was there somehow, and that whole trip with Don, that whole pilgrimage was just beautiful. And he was, just such a wonderful, wonderful person. And I'm overwhelmed by hearing everyone's stories. It's just wonderful. Thank you, Jay Barbara.
Thanks, Jane. Let's see. Candy. Don't forget to unmute.
Right. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Candy, and I wasn't going to speak, but I just feel that I should make some contribution because I love Don so much, and I'm so touched by all your stories, and it just drives home to me how the effect he had on so many people. It's just incredible. Anyway, I met Don in 1967 briefly at the Sufi Center in San Francisco. And it was very brief, but the next time I met him, I was waking up from a coma in the hospital, and he was sitting by my bedside, meditating on a poster of Baba that he had brought for my room. And anyway, we became friends after that, and I moved to Spain. And after that, I traveled a lot and he traveled a lot also, as everybody knows. And we would meet like ships in the night at an airport or for a quick lunch somewhere, maybe Madrid, or it was always amazing. But I had one-on-one time with him all those times, and it was what a treasure that was. I don't really think I appreciated it at the time, but now I do. And I was always so impressed, as everyone, with his balance and his deliberative responses to everything. You felt like you could tell Don anything, and he would think about it and say, well, I mean, I felt like I could tell him I murdered somebody and he would go, well, Candy, I don't see anywhere in the discourse. Anyway, he was like, anyway, so one thing I remember that he told me during that time, one of those meetings, was that say I was whining about what a bad person I was, and I couldn't help it. And he said to me, well, Candy, he said, you're going to find many rocks inside you, but don't throw them all out all at once. He said, take each one and examine it, because you might find a vein of gold in it. And I thought that was really extraordinary thing to say. I've never forgotten it. And also, I may be the only one with the dubious distinction of having made Don angry. Not. Because he was always so balanced, and you really, as I said, you felt like you could tell him anything. So one day I was having a drink with him somewhere. I can't remember where. I think it was Miami Airport. Anyway, he was talking about how Elizabeth he had just met Elizabeth recently, and she mentioned that she'd written to me about one of the trips to Spain. And I said, oh yeah, I said, yeah, I haven't answered that yet. And he looked at me. He said, what? Someone as close to Mayor Baba as Elizabeth Patterson, and you have not answered her letter immediately? I was like, no. And he said, you answer her immediately. He was really very angry that I had done that. Anyway, of course, that passed. That was a flash of anger from Don. Anyway, throughout the years, he would fly down to Spain. I lived in the south of Spain, and he would fly down to Spain for Baba meetings there. And he was so available for everybody. It's just incredible. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Everybody has really said it. I miss you, Don. I love you so much. That's my little contribution. Thank you all, Jay Baba.
Thank you, Candy. Honey Bunny?
Jay Baba, everybody. I only met Don once. It was, I think, in 2008, plus or minus a few years. Maybe somebody here knows. When he talked at that loft in Brooklyn. I didn't know much about Baba Land or, Babaville or, Baba people even. Yeah. At the time, I'd read Listen Humanity, which I thought, was found very impressive. And he talked about, he was very serious in this talk, and it seemed to be about the organization of Baba people in India, I think primarily, and he was concerned about something. Like, my impression was that it was that he was concerned about a hegemony, if you know what I mean, or a monopoly of power there, and he was very serious. But like I say, I was too uninformed or too new to really know what he was talking about. And afterwards, I said something personal to him, and he looked very serious and didn't reply. So that's my memory, Jai Baba.
Angela, I'm going to check in with you real quick, and Betty, about, I know we're coming up on 12, and I know Don felt it very important to end meetings on time, but I want to check in with you and see how much leeway we have in that.
Our next meeting is at 2, so
Okay.
we have until maybe even quarter till then, or yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
In the memory of Don, we'll try not to go too far over, but I do want to see if anybody else would like to share. Hasn't had a chance. See, Rosie?
Thank you. I've just got a short little memory, really. But I first met Don in the early 1980s. I think I met him several times in India. And I remember him celebrating his birthday at Merizad, which was lovely. And I met him several times in London. Like other people have mentioned, he was very generous, and we went for tea at the Savoy. And then in the 1990s, I was married to a guy who was dealing in computers, and we heard that Don was looking for a new computer. So my then husband arranged for him to have a computer, and Don would come down to where we lived in Somerset, and he took us out to Bath, to posh meals and things. It was really lovely. And then in the late 1990s, that marriage broke up, and I was totally devastated by it. In fact, I had something of a breakdown as a result. And I was teaching up in Nottingham, and Don was the last thing on my mind. And I'd always regarded him as very intellectual, although he was very heart-based. I'd not experienced his tenderness and love that people have spoken about. And then something happened after the breakdown of my marriage. I was living in a kind of bedsit where I was teaching in Nottingham. And I had this phone call from Don, and he said he wanted to come up and see me. Now, he was in London, I was in Nottingham, which was, a 2 or 3 hour train journey away. And he said he was going to come up for the day and bring lunch and talk to me and then go back again. And I was totally gobsmacked by this. I thought, my God, I wasn't that close to him. I didn't feel I was close to him. And he was going to take a whole day out of his busy schedule to come and talk to me. Anyway, he arrived, got on the train at King's Cross, came up to Nottingham on the train, took a taxi to where I was living, and arrived with a flask of wine, red wine in his flask, and 2 bacon sandwiches that he bought at King's Cross station. And I just was so overwhelmed by his kindness. And we sat and talked for a couple of hours. And what struck me was that he was so hurt by my husband, ex-husband, cutting off from him. He couldn't understand why he'd rejected him as well. And I was amazed that he shared that feeling of hurt and emotion. It's like I hadn't expected that of him, and it's just like my heart just melted. And I just, from then on, I just took Don as an example of love in action. That for me was love in action. A day out of his life just to come and be with me because my heart was broken. Just to be with me. He couldn't heal my heart. He could just be with me. I don't even know if we talked about Baba. I don't think we did. I think he was just there as a presence to say, I care. And then he went away again. And I just was, every time I think of that, I just am so moved by his concern and his love. And he was always very insistent that that we don't hide our light under a stone, under a bushel, that we fulfill our talents, the talents that Barbara's given to us. So I'm a writer, and he was always saying, Barbara wants you to do that. Don't withdraw from the world, don't hide it, don't be less than you are. Fulfill yourself in all your talents because the Barbara's given them to you. So I've always remembered that, and I think of him with great love and respect.
Thank you.
And Thank you. Jai Baba. Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie. Wayne, I see your hand up. And I think I have a photo for you. Don't forget to unmute. See, Wayne, we can't hear you. See, are you unmuted? There you
Yeah,
go.
Shropshire Sahabas, near Bishop's Castle. There we go. Again, Don coming out of his way, making effort, commitment to groups and the Sahabas there, and he came that way. I think, I'm not sure of the year, it could be 2005 or something like that. So, so many wonderful stories and so much heart. And I just wanted to share, for me, with Don, it's all about humanity. And I don't know where it came from, but he was famously asked, Don, how do you love God? And he replied, I don't love God, I love human beings. And I think that says a lot about Don's connection to the path, that for him, it was through human beings and humanity, first and foremost. And I'd just like to share, if I can find it, some words from Baba that I think were maybe Don's favorite, or what he thought was most important that Baba had given. So just 2 paragraphs of the last message on the alphabet board, all about, the first 2 paragraphs, all about inner links. So I thought it'd be nice to have some Baba here as well. So Baba's last message on the alphabet board. There is no reason at all for any of you to worry. Baba was, Baba is, and Baba will also be eternally existent. Severance of external relations does not mean a termination of internal connections. It was only for establishing the eternal connections, the external contacts have been maintained till now. The time has now come for being bound in the chain of internal connections. Hence, external contact is no longer necessary. It is possible to establish the internal link by obeying Baba's orders. I give you all my blessings for strengthening these internal links. I am always with you, and I am not away from you. I was, am, and will remain eternally with you. And it is for promoting this realization that I have severed external contact. This will enable all persons to realize truth by being bound to each other with internal links. And, you know, so much wonderful talk about companionship today and the links. And for me, that's one of the most wonderful gifts I've had from Don is the human beings that I've come in contact with through him and through Baba and the links that we have. So I want to thank Don and thank you all for that. So Jai Baba.
Thanks, Wayne. Heather?
Jai Baba, everyone. One thing I wanted to say about Don, there are many things to say and many wonderful experiences with Don and the YPG group. I have some memory occurred to me about, I think this was in Paris. I asked him a question about mandali emails, and I was really curious about mandali emails. So dramatic, and he looked at me really fiercely and said, "Be careful about where you're going with this. He seemed to become huge, gigantic, and really fierce. He was, he's very unassuming and gentle, kind person, but he got really intense at that moment. He seemed larger than life. Like, I just realized at that moment, what a giant he was. And Catherine, you said that he was huge, and he really grew really huge in that moment. And I was terrified. Just a glimpse into his giantness that we didn't see normally every day. Big person being mandali of Baba. That's it. That's all I want to say. Jai Baba, everyone, good to see you.
Thanks, Heather. Just want to check if anybody else wants to share, and we can also leave the Zoom open, Angela said, to just have popcorn chit chat after. But if there's anything else, anybody's has, oh, Alta. Yeah. See, you can go ahead, Alta. Let me see. Let me unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm a latecomer to Don. I met him for the first time in 2007. He granted me an interview at Mayher Spiritual Center. So I met him at that time to talk with him about small groups. And as a result of that, the young group met that weekend at Mayher Spiritual Center, and with the approval of the group, he invited me to come just be an observer of a small group in action. So that was really wonderful. I want to back up from that just to indicate that I'm not quite sure when I would have read Don's, what's the name of the book? Man's Search for Meaning, I think it is. I was sort of a skeptic in terms of Meher Baba. And I will say that reading that book, knowing it was written by an American chemist, because I'm a scientist myself, gave me an opportunity to really look at Meher Baba as for what he was saying that he is. So it seemed that if another scientist could do that, then I could really be open to looking at that possibility. So that was a wonderful gift to me from Don, as well as meeting with the young group. And then a year after that meeting with Don in Myrtle Beach, I was writing a note to him by email just to thank him for that meeting. And he said, "Oh, I've been looking for your email. I wanted to invite you to go on a tour in India." So I ended up going on the 2009 Beads on One String tour with him and 48 other folks. And that was quite a phenomenal event for me, my first trip to India. And I tell people it just about killed me. And of course, that's part of the whole idea, isn't it? So it was just wonderful to have been able to be a part of that group and to connect with Don at that time. So I'm always grateful to Don, and it's so wonderful to share in this time with all of you as we honor him today. So thank you, Jai Baba.
Sevn, Tony has a hand up. You might not be able to see.
Oh, sure. Tony, please go ahead.
Hi, it just, by the way, your daughter is so lovely. It just occurred to me in listening to this one story I should share. from Lake Balaton, since it was so life-changing. On the very last day, the very last session, at the very end of it, Don did something which, to my experience, was very unusual, and he spoke about something very personal, and in the group, and he said that I'm sure you're all familiar. He said that for all of his years with Baba, he had surrendered, but not his finances and not his sex life, and that recently he had surrendered both of those, and that Baba had stepped in immediately and worked out everything. And that was all. He didn't go into any details about it, but it left a powerful impression on me. I didn't get back to New York right away. I was going to this UN Human Rights Conference, and Alfred and Marion Saunders said they were kidnapping me. And they took me to Fallenfleur, where Baba met with the hierarchy, and we drove through Vienna and so many things. Baba was in the clouds above us and stuff. The clouds formed his face. Anyway, I got back to New York, and I sat on the edge of my bed and I looked at Baba's picture and began a very intimate, out loud conversation. Another thing that was a gift of Don to me, the idea of talking to Baba out loud. And I said, basically, I surrendered my relationship life, my love life to Baba. I was wanting something and I was pushing it away, and I was wanting something and I was pushing it away. And I said, Baba, you are in me. You know what I feel. You know what I need. You pick her, I said, no conditions. And the conversation ended, and immediately the phone rang. And it's a long story, so I won't go into specifics, but a few weeks later, I had the exact same conversation with Baba. And again, the phone rang, and it was the same person setting up a meeting, which led to a relationship that was, that kind of, the phrase is cleaned out my clock. It pulled out everything that was within me, and also made room for love to come pouring out in a way that had not been free to do before. And it ended within 6 months. It ended, and it left me with a lot of inner work to do. And 4 years later, I met my wife, who clearly was Baba's response to that surrender. And I am very grateful. And it's not necessarily an easy relationship, but it's so uplifting and so full of love and Baba's service and presence. But none of it could have happened without that story from Don and putting it into action when I got home. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. I have one small story to throw in. I think for me, seeing Don unpack these little interactions in larger contents of Baba's words and then express them in his life. I've heard a lot of stories today about Don as a person and his expressions in his life. And I just, so many of them go back to these interactions with Baba, like his tenderness and the way Baba would grab his hand when they were riding in the car to Aurangabad, or there's a number of stories. And I was often inspired by how he would be able to take just a small phrase from Baba and change his life around it. And I just have one example that that was one of the more moving ones about Don's meditative life, which I think after his Sufi years, he probably didn't speak about it as much, but he had a very consistent, persistent meditation practice on a few different fronts. And one of them was interesting. One of them stemmed from when his mother passed away. He was in California, and his next trip, which was, I believe it was almost a year later, to India, he told Baba that his mother had passed away. And Baba said, Don, why didn't you tell me this? Why don't I know about this? Baba would always ask about his mother. He knew all about it. They had that kind of conversation. And Don said, well, I thought you would know. You're God. And Baba said, no. And this was one of the episodes that Don said Baba looked a little angry with him, is that, while in this body, we're humans. I need you to use human means to communicate with me always. And so from that moment on till probably the end of his life, every night before Don would go to bed, he would out loud give a report to Baba of what happened in his day. He would go through his day and these important things. And it was striking because we traveled quite a bit, and we would get to like Mumbai after that long flight from somewhere, and we'd be sharing a hotel room, and he wouldn't go to bed. He could barely get into the bed in his late 90s, and he'd have this like, he would go through 15, 20 minutes of connecting with Baba, giving his report, and it just didn't matter what state he was in. It was always there. And that discipline that he had with his relationship with Baba, and it always being the forefront. He was just always framing everything in his life around his master, was just truly one of the most inspiring things that I've ever seen. Let's see, David, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say two things briefly. One was about this sort of thing. Don always said to me that Baba waits to be invited into our problem. And we need to take that step to invite Baba in. And once we do that, we really see quite a lot of different energy that's going on. The other thing was just another story about Begin to Begin, which is about kind of these strange connections. I had a granny flat on top of the house, my dear friend, the actress, I refer to her. And it was the house where Leslie Hutchinson lived, Hutch, who sang the Begin. And there would be these stories about how Hutch had this wife and they kept chickens in the back garden, but then all these sort of very upper class women would turn up at 2 in in their taxis to listen to him sing. And Don came to have a meal with me in this house. So we had a meal together in the house where Hutch lived and had great fun with that. That's all, yeah.
Hello.
Wayne?
Sevn, Stefan had his hand up earlier, you might not have seen.
Yes, Stefan. Stefan, would you like to share?
Do you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you now. Thanks.
Oh, okay. I have had to push a button. I don't have much to tell right now. It was just a few things. It must have been in the late 80s or early 90s that two gentlemen in dark blue business suits turned up in my office of a publishing house in Germany that was dedicated to spiritual literature. And he was looking for a publisher to publish the discourses and other works related to Meher Baba. And well, this meeting at my office there was the beginning of a wonderful spiritual friendship. And in the course of it, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you great.
Yeah, in the course of it, he entrusted me with the work to translate the discourses and God Speaks and also Listen Humanity later on into German. And he invited me to some of the meetings with Meher Baba followers. And because I have my own spiritual path has been on the way of Zen. And when I sometimes I told him, I don't know whether I'm up to the work of translating these things. And anyway, I'm not a follower of Baba. For me, Meher Baba is one of the great spiritual masters and teachers of mankind. But I have not this inner relationship to him, and his reaction always was kind of, well, you don't know. You have it, but you don't know that you do. And at present, I am in a state of, well, what the mystics call the dark night of the soul. And in a very deep spiritual and also physical crisis. And I remember that, I think Renate told me that Don's last intuitions when he was in hospital shortly before he died came out of a deep experience of helplessness. And I find myself in a state of deep helplessness on the spiritual and the physical side right now. Right now that I'm talking to you, I have the feeling I might drop from my chair and die. And just this reminded me that some of Don's deepest spiritual intuitions obviously occurred just before he died, and when he was in the hospital and experienced this a state of deep helplessness. So I'm praying to Don and all my spiritual teachers that I have encountered in the course of my life, that this helplessness that Don experienced, that I'm experiencing right now, will help me also to realize a deep spiritual intuition, and that I'm not really dependent on this physical body. I find myself in so much trouble right now, and I want to thank Don for the years of spiritual friendship in which we have often met at my place, and he invited me to some of his of the meetings of Meher Baba friends, and I hope that finally I will realize that I'm not there is an inner link to him and to Meher Baba that will help me through this crisis that I find myself in right now. Thank you, Don, for your kindness of being that I experienced. You see, I'm not even finding words for it right now. So I'd rather be silent right now and greet all of you. And thanks to Don again for his friendship. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Stefan. And thank you again for all of your labors on making Baba's words available in German. Stefan translated discourses and God Speaks, and they're probably some of the best translations into a foreign language we have of any of Baba's words. So nice to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank all of you. And all the best to all of you on the path of following Baba, Meher Baba.
Betty?
Stefan, I just wanted to remind you to remember. Baba says, remember to take his name, remember him. That it's a pretty simple simple thing that he says, but so important. That's all. Thank you, Jai Baba, to you.
Stefan, you may not know, but
yes,
Baba had told Don many years ago when he had asked him to be in charge of many of these writings and to make sure that the integrity of Baba's words was maintained. Baba told Don that his words, Baba's words, had energy attached to them such that over time, after exposure to these words, they would kind of open, they would reveal, they would set off little atomic bombs of consciousness. And from the fact that you spent such time and energy involved with Baba's words, I'm quite sure that his Nazar, his gaze is on you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Jai Baba.
It was, you see, the process of translating these books was really deeply rewarding, because this happened to me also with translating the works of other spiritual masters, that I felt that I had entered into a kind of resonance with the author of this work. And I felt like this teacher was standing behind me while I was translating and looking at what I was writing and said, okay, this is okay. And no, you still have to find another formulation. So it was really deeply rewarding, this work. And I hope it will, what I experienced then will come back to me in this crisis that I find myself in right now. And well, thank you very much for your kind words.
Jai Baba, Stefan, I want to reach out to you in this dark night of the soul. It is truly real. Baba's name, absolutely, you should be taking it every moment. I'm going through this too. I feel like I'm getting towards the end of this passage, but helps calling it out aloud. We are shedding the ego in this dark night, and it hurts to shed that ego.
Yes.
I was with Elaine Cox yesterday, and she said that she read God Speaks for the third time in the meeting, in the group here in Asheville. And that it really occurred to her that she heard it so profoundly when she read, nothing is happening. There's nothing happening. So that's something that might help. So I reach out to you. I'm also experiencing, it is truly real, and it is devastating. I've never had something like this happen to me before.
Thank you for your kind words. And it is already a help to have another soul who comprehends what one is going through in these times.
Absolutely.
It's encouraging. Thank you very much.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Well, we're at 12:30. We can keep the line open for another hour and a half, but I just want to thank everybody that shared about Baba today, or about Don. And yeah, it was just wonderful. And Angela will make a recording available of this if there's anything you would like to listen to again. And please feel free to hang out and unmute yourself and chat. It's wonderful seeing you.
Could I ask a question before you disappear, before anybody disappears? I did put a question in the chat, Sevn, to ask whether those airplane notes that Don wrote are available to read anywhere.
Yes, Rosie, I have a digital copy. If you email me, or if anybody emails me, I can
thank you. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank you, Sevn, and thank you everyone for your sharing today. So moving and spiritually real, especially the sharings of the dark night, those dark nights of our souls. And I will need to leave, but before I do, I could not before I thanked every one of you from the bottom of my heart. So I hope to connect with you soon in the future. And again, thank you so much for your deep sharing of the heart. Don is present with us, of course, as Meher Baba is as well.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
How we usually wind up these, this is, oh, let's see. I guess this is probably the time to stop the recording.
After he died in the ambulance and came back to life. I remember visiting him there in the emergency room and just not knowing how he would be doing after everything that had happened. And I was struck, first of all, by his cheerfulness and continual lack of worry. Like, this is the moment that really convinced me that that Baba really did take away Don's ability to worry. And also I was struck by his kindness and patience with a nurse who was kind of condescending the way she was talking to him, that she was just, you know, speaking to him as if he was just like an adult old man or something, and just saying, oh, that must have been really scary, huh? Or almost like he was a little kid. And he just took off his oxygen mask and just patiently tried to explain to her that he just had a problem where he couldn't get air into his lungs and had to remedy that. And and it just and then he was so concerned about me catching my plane and getting back to Arizona on time. And so that he taught me a lot just in that moment of spending the 20 minutes or whatever it was with him in the emergency room that morning. And then of course he had, and then the whole thing just got more amazing as I heard about his heart surgery and him coming on Cynthia's birthday back to Cynthia's house to play Begin the Begin on the piano and everything. So, and then it was 2.5 years later that I got to go on the Beads on One String pilgrimage with him, the 2009 pilgrimage. So it's just amazing that he was still around to do that with us 2.5 years later. And I guess another thing I could say about Don is that he entered my life just a few months after I'd been diagnosed with a disease, actually, which I've now recovered from with surgery. But he was there for 6 years wanting to know every detail of what was going on with my health. And, you know, and made me promise shortly after meeting him to just let him know what was going on and what the changes were. And so he could be a part of that process with me, like all the way through the surgery. And it was just, the last time I saw Don in person was just a month or so after the surgery, when I was still recovering from that. And it was very interesting timing on Baba's part, that was where he entered and then left my life physically, was just surrounding that whole period of time when I was dealing with a very serious health issue. And I could, I'm sure, go on some other time, but that's probably enough for now.
Thanks, Dan. Pam, nice to see you.
Hi, Jay Baba. So wonderful to be here. I sadly didn't know about it until a dear friend texted me. So I'm so happy to come to this and be a part of it and hear all of you. It was truly a blessing. Of course, all of Baba's mandali, any connection we have with them through their stories or their our personal experiences, and just so much to be able to say about Don, but I'll just say a few things. I had the good fortune to sometimes give him rides to different places when he was in LA. And so we had many conversations about life, and I got to witness him in action, of course, with other people. And one of the very touching things was one day, I don't know how, he must have been someone new to Baba, someone very young who played the cello. And I'm not sure how this all got arranged. I guess Don had to be in such and such place at such and such time. Is it okay if you take me? I said, of course. So we get in the car and we're driving to LA, and I'm following the directions, and we step out into this home of 3 young musicians. And he greeted them with such love and tenderness, and they began to play for him. One was on the cello, and I think 2 on the violin. And it was as if time stood still. And Don was just weeping and weeping. And I, experiencing this, was just weeping. There was so much love, and there was hardly anything spoken. And, there were some greetings, and then we left. And it was, like I said, it was as if time stood still, and I witnessed this beautiful relationship he had, and of course, how touched he was by their music, and I was too. Anyway, so that was one thing that always stood out for me. And then in our beautiful young people's group, I'll never forget, at the beginning of every meeting, Don would take time to ask each one of us there, how did we sleep? How are we feeling? And just kind of like a beautiful, loving check-in, personally, how we were. And I think this came from Baba, who would always, when people would come to greet him, to, personal times with people in Mandali Hall, I believe, where he would always inquire about, did they rest well? Are they eating? How Don would say, how's your plumbing system? How's the plumbing working? And so I then wasn't conscious that I was carrying this in my life. And so many people that I work with, I work with, 50 some people every day that I walk into this clinic, to go out of my way to ask how people are. And I didn't used to do that. I would be kind of focused on what I needed to do, and I got to get the job done. And from watching him over those years, I think I absorbed it, and with love, at least with remembering Baba in each one, I try to do that as much as I can. So I just wanted to share those few. There's so many, but those few. And I'm so so happy that his work is continuing through some of you. And anyways, just wonderful to be here. Jai Baba.
Thanks, Pam.
Sevn, I'll say a couple of things, and it's just reaped from these stories too, and it keeps piling on. But just from this last story, I remember being at Don's Three Bridges seminar on the Oregon coast here at Doug and Marnie's place, and learning about truth through Don, who had a pretty good teacher. I don't even have the words for it now because I think it's pretty integrated into my life. But the thing that I remember about that seminar is the fact of considering what someone is ready to hear as well when you consider telling a truth. And that level of kindness and compassion, empathy, understanding, intelligence, all those qualities that he was endowed with and generous with, they get inside of us, even if we don't understand. I always tell my children that we live in beautiful places because I want that beauty to go inside of us. And the same is true with friendship and companionship and generosity. When we surround ourselves with people, giants like Don, or those of us carrying on his work. I'm the secretary of the Beads on One String Foundation. I'm the newbie on the job. I got hooked in through Marnie, who was also my connection to Baba. When I moved from Alaska with two young kids to a little school called Nesquin Valley School on the Oregon coast, at the far side of the tallest head on the coast. And a seeker my whole life, that's where I found out about Meher Baba. So anyway, to be back there to meet Don many years later was a real delight. And I guess the what's not integrated yet that I'd like to say is that when we come together and tell these stories like this, I have a couple of pages of notes that are just fantastic tidbits and roadmaps. Right from the beginning, Cynthia, you saying that Don's, just to know that there was a path back and through the blackness of knowing oneness was the solution for Don. He didn't need to rush anything, just knowing that. I mean, what a treasure that is, I can live off of that for a couple of weeks at least. Tony, just that part of that guzzle. What irks is the ordinariness of this pain. Not even our names on an honor roll of the slain. Those are just beautiful. I was talking to my newly graduated college student, Ivy, a 22-year-old that's going through so much pain in a love relationship. And I texted her that those two lines, and she said, "Oh, thank you." It does feel ordinary, but it feels unique to me right in this moment too. And Don saying, use words when he said, "Well, Baba, you're God, And Baba said, when we're in these human bodies, use the words. And therefore, Sevn, you observing him sitting there and having this conversation, giving the report of the day. How lovely, what a wonderful example. So, when we come together and tell these stories, all of a sudden, thank you feels so trite, because we've now been given these gifts that we take forward. So I am so grateful. Thank you.
See, Meher Prasad, you have your hand up?
Yes, I thought I'll share a small incident that had a big impact in my own personal relationship with Baba, and that really came from Don Stevens. And this is a story that he told many times, but this was the first time I heard it when he came to Seattle in mid 90s.
Maher,
And
can we see you? Or did you want to?
let's see, I'm not looking good, but I will turn it on. Handle me, yes. All right.
You always look good. I'm sorry.
All right. So this was a time when Don Stevens came to Seattle in mid 90s, and I was somewhere in mid 20s. And although I saw him many times before in India, whatever he spoke was just above my intelligence. I was too young to understand what he was saying. But this time when he came to Seattle, it was I was just beginning my career, and he related this story that he related many times over his speeches. Um, but he said that there was one time where he was in this oil industry, and once when he went to Merazad, he saw the simplicity of how the mandali were living in the most basic, with the most basic needs and very simple things that they had there. And here he was living in a very luxurious hotels and spending his time there, and he felt kind of guilty or odd about that because he didn't think that it was quote humanitarian or spiritual kind of a living, so it bothered him. So uh, he thought he'll ask Baba about that the next time he visited. So he went to Merazad, and for some reason he couldn't bring that up because Baba would avoid that topic. So when he went back, he said, "Oh, I forgot to ask him that," and he did that again. So this happened like 3 or 4 times, and finally, one time he really made a very strong resolve that he will ask Baba that question, and then he somehow brought that up, and he told Baba what he was feeling. And Baba looked at him and he said, "Just who do you think put you there in the first place? Put you in the oil industry in the first place?" And then he said, "I put you there because that is the environment which is best suited to bring out your sanskaras or to work out your sanskaras." And that had a really, just who do you think put you there in the first place was really something that hit home to me. And it helped me many times in my own, events in life. And I remembered what Baba told him. And of course, with everything that Baba does, it's not just targeted to one person, but it applies to everyone. So I remember that whenever there is some environment that comes up or some event that comes up in life, that is the right environment that Baba wants me to be to work out my sanskaras. So I thought I'll share that. Jai Baba.
Sevn, what about that time that you and Don traveled to Colorado, and as you were coming through the airport, you encountered a famous hip hop music guy? Do you remember that?
Yes, who was? Oh,
Flava Flav.
Oh, it's Flavor Flav, yeah.
And wore the big clocks around his neck and all this stuff. And what did Don say?
Oh, I can't remember.
It was something like he said, "Oh, that looks to be a very creative individual."
Very attracted to him. Yes.
So no judgment, no judgment, just appreciation. That was awesome.
Sevn, I just wanted to say, I didn't somehow I missed being as close to Don as obviously so many people were. I was, but his book, Listen Humanity, was my first Baba book, and I still feel like it's one of the best. I give it to new folks who want to know. To me, it's got everything. It's got this wonderful, warm, human story of people, the times in India, his tussles with I think his roommate, how when at the 3 Incredible Weeks, and it has Baba's words. To me it has everything, and I guess that really sums up Don, doesn't it? He was clearly a balance of head and heart so beautifully. So that's all. It's my tidbit. This has been wonderful, wonderful sharing. Wow. Thanks so much for everybody. Anybody else?
Yeah, maybe we could just all close together the way we started, with a moment of silence and maybe 5 deep breaths, even deeper than the ones we started with, so we can carry this into our day or evening.